everyone. We have Jan again with us to talk about Industry 4.0 insights. So, Jan, how are you doing today?
Great. Had a great afternoon working with the team, and now there's a massive thunderstorm, which I always think is kind of awesome. So, and it's a call to prayer as well. So it's all coming together very nicely for some thoughts on Industry 4.0.
All right, great. So let's start with the first question. We reported earlier about Lokanav, an Indian software company. Okay, so what was interesting about Lokanav is how they are bringing IO 4.0 in emerging markets. So what are your thoughts on that, about IO 4.0 coming from India more and more that from what we are hearing nowadays?
Well, my first thought when I initially saw that is I misunderstood it as trying to get self-driving trucks onto the road in India, which I thought was ambitious because I've been to India and the roads are uh, the definition of chaos. So if you can figure that out, then anything else in the world is easy. Um, but then I understood it's actually the basic steps of digitization and then digitalization. So there's an interesting contrast there, right? First, digitizing the paper records into something that has a digitized form. So using maybe Excel or the platform software, right? But it's in an electronic device. It's not on a piece of paper because so much of the world's information is still done by pen and paper, right? Including in the world's financial systems. And that's the first step. And then from there to digitization to digitalization, where you're getting the feedback loops of information. This truck is now running in real time. We can see its fuel efficiency. We can see, its safety, all these things. So I think that's a huge, huge leap in progress. And I think what's particularly attractive about it is no doubt the affordability aspect. I think that's such an important part of Industry 4.0 tech. It's not, you don't need billions of dollars to build a platform for the truckers, right? You can actually do that with a few million, which is available in India. There's no doubt about that. So I think what's really cool is the sort of democratization aspect, and I think that's really where we see a nice opportunity to use all this awesome technology to build a better world, right? To improve, in a very simple way, could be improving fuel efficiency, improving the safety records, things like that. So I think it's very nice that I imagine there's that financial accessibility, and there's also then a sort of a digital mindset behind this, right? Because often there can be quite fixed mindsets about what is possible, what is not. So that seems to me there's an opportunity. It's not just disrupting from a hard technology point of view that you have a platform. It's the mindsets behind that platform and the thinking in the management and the employees about how they use that platform to empower themselves to be more successful. So I think that's a very exciting idea there. Pretty cool.
What advice would you give to those looking at those emerging technology? What advice can they take, or what can they learn from those emerging technology and apply that in their own organization today before they face disruption?
It's very, very hard to digitalize properly. It's extremely hard. And in fact, many organizations haven't even digitized properly. So I would say slow down and do the digitization first. And then as you're doing that, realize, it seems so easy to say, just build a dashboard, right? Boom. You saw in the video, okay, they've got some dashboards about fuel efficiency, whatever, that's easy. Building a dashboard is one of the hardest things I've ever done. I've spent years and years and years and years building Leadapreneur dashboards, and we still are building them. And so I think that what happens is people underestimate just how hard it is. So I think it's best to get cracking now, digitize first, which means that you have, you're removing the pen and paper manual processes, and then focus on the digitalization in terms of building a culture where you're using data to drive your decision making, because that will incentivize you to build out digitalization. So that means you're not just making decisions based on your intuition or instinct or what you've always done, what tradition says or blah, blah, blah. You have real hard data that shows you. So it could be as simple as, for example, if you're doing a truck route, you've always driven a certain way because you've always believed it's most efficient, but it might be that Google Maps in real time will say, hey, don't take this route, take this route. And so you take a different decision, right, to drive differently. That seems like a small point, but repeating that, it's not about the one moment, it's about building the culture of being data driven. And I think that's such an important aspect of digitalization, is using data to drive decision making. And that's ultimately where you want to end up.
That's such a powerful point over there when you talk about data driving Industry 4.0. All right, so let's move from data to brainwave innovation. So what we've seen recently is China has been innovating around brainwave innovation, where they're going to send it to space. They're using it in factories with workers, and they're even using it in battlefield with soldiers. So what are your thoughts on that?
It's pretty cool. It's pretty nascent, I think, but it potentially could be a quantum leap in the interface with information. So what that means is if you compare to if I compare how many words I can write on a keyboard versus how many words I can write on pen and paper, for me, I am orders of magnitude faster. Right? I could write 1,000 words in under an hour. Good, like in a good structured, amount of words, not just 1,000 random words, but actually to be able to think and the way in which you operate with the information. So, for example, you're working with PowerPoint, you can move the slides around. You can edit in real time. Whereas when you are doing analog writing, typically the text that you write is what you're stuck with, right? Or you have to cross it all out and start again. So that's actually a very, very important insight. It's the interface space. And so by jumping into keyboards and being able to interface with digitized information and digital flows using the keyboards and using mouse, seems like a simple idea, but it's a game changer in terms of your productivity and how much you can produce. Now, potentially, what might be the next leap forward in terms of interface capability that could 10x, 100x your productivity. And maybe this interface could be something like that, right? Where you're able to think what you want and the AI will somehow work with you and bring it to life. So you're no longer typing the code, you're imagining the program and it materializes in front of you. So I don't know where it will end up, but this certainly presents the opportunity to be something like that. So let's see, could be pretty cool.
Okay. Do you think organizations should start looking into it and have that in the disruptor radar?
I think if you're in a specific niche that could use it, at the moment, I think it's still very, I imagine it to be very niche driven innovation. And I think that's often what's interesting is kind of, like you said, it's good to have things on your disruptor radar and having a sense of timing, right? You don't want to be too early, too late, obviously, to try and get that right. So I would suggest probably only if you're in a very specialized space where that could be interesting, keep an eye on it. But I think it probably needs a few more years before it comes through and becomes really reliable, because I think that's often where things become difficult. It's not that you use it once, it's are you going to depend your life on this interface, right? If you're working in an environment where there might be heavy machinery that you're operating, and if you get it wrong, you drop a rock on your head or, whatever it might be. And so that's often where things become more tricky and just take more time. So, in a laboratory setting or under ideal conditions, it works well, but in the real world, things often don't work well. And that's I think where we see that delay in innovations realizing their potential is because figuring those things out is hard, but eventually does happen, right? If you remember to 10 years ago, 2012, apps were only really just starting to become very usable and interesting, right? And smartphones were just about with 3G and 4G starting to come through. But now today it's very seamless, isn't it? So it will get there, but I think it's still very much at the beginning.
Okay, and now here's a fun question for you. If you had the option to buy either of the cars from Ford, so let's just say one car is autonomous and the other one you get a headset and you can use brainwave to navigate around, which one would you go for?
Autonomous, because one of the things that I love about Grab, and one of the main reasons, I just don't have to think. Driving, I mean, I love driving. I really enjoy driving. But most of the time, city driving is not that pleasurable. You're stuck in traffic. There's like apocalyptic rainstorms where, quite literally here in KL, you might get flooded and drown, right? Or it's super hot and you got to find car parking, and it's just hassle after hassle. You get to the toll, your touch and goes run out, right? So I like the idea of, I think that the truly scarce commodity is our attention space and our consciousness points. So I think each day we have a set amount of consciousness points we can allocate. And if I have to drive, then that's going to cost me more consciousness points. Or I can just sit at the back of a nice car and be driven somewhere and arrive, step out the door and say thank you. So if I have to imagine driving the car, that sounds even more, I'd actually maybe would prefer to just drive it, so I'm sure Ford has, thought something clever about this, but I think autonomy, it would be my preference because it would just allow me to relax more and save my consciousness points.
All right. Okay. So now let's move on to blockchain and cryptocurrency. As we are seeing that Ethereum might be going into Zambia. We already have Cardano in Ethiopia, and UK, I won't say UK is going into crypto, but they're just looking at the regulations. But now looking at Thailand, who is taking a step back and telling banks to reduce trading of digital assets. What do you have to say on that?
Well, there were some good points today in our session with our client, and some of the participants, one of the participants made a great point that don't see a ban as absolute, right? It doesn't mean forever and ever. And that was, I think, a great point, because maybe it's just about slowing things down and trying to reduce the risk of too big of a bubble growing too quickly. I never think it's particularly clever to say that something's a bubble. Everything's a bubble. Life itself is a bubble. We're all in bubbles, right? So, and every bubble pops at some point. So it's more about making sure that it's something that has a greater chance of sustainability and avoiding total catastrophe. So I think it's sensible, it's prudent to slow things down. There are a lot of scams, there are a lot of risks, and there's a lot of rubbish out there. But there's also a lot of really fantastic work as well. So it's this sort of I think it's good to see set regulators regulating and taking a prudent approach to it. I think also my understanding is it's not an outright ban where someone like, as I understand it, China have banned all for holding of cryptocurrencies, which I think is too much, and I think that's a bit silly, and I think they will come to regret that, but or even change it. But looking at Thailand, is my understanding that they are only reducing how much they can interact in terms of cryptocurrencies. You can still own cryptocurrencies as a Thai person, and so on. So I think it seems to be a sensible way of just putting the brakes on it a little bit, allowing regulators to catch up, allowing the bubble to slow down so it doesn't go too fast. So I think it's prudent and sensible.
Okay, but then when you say slow down, do you really think slowing down is the way to go in Industry 4.0? Because like how we saw in Wall Street Bets was it a few months ago, was it last year? I can't remember, how the community itself overturned that whole share price of, I forgot the company's name, but anyway, they did something, right? So do you really think slowing down is the way to go forward in Industry 4.0?
Absolutely, yeah, because I think it's well, put it like this: if you drive a car faster and faster and faster, you will crash. The end. Right? Because you're going to reach a point where you're driving the car so fast that your ability to control the vehicle will be lesser than the complexity of the environment that you're in, right? And it just takes once. And when you're going at that high speed, right? If you're doing 300 kilometers on the expressway, 200 kilometers an hour, right? Then the crash is going to be very significant versus a crash at 20 kilometers an hour, for example. So it's worth recognizing that when you accelerate, yes, of course, you get to go faster and do more cool stuff. And I like to drive my motorbike as well, right? I like to go fast, but it's also very clear to me that the consequences of getting it wrong are just therefore much higher. So what what happens is we get caught up in the FOMO and we rush around and we're going faster and faster and faster, but we're losing control. And when you lose control and it goes wrong, it can then all go really, really wrong, really quickly and really badly, and then it's a very nasty mess, right? And so it's important to move quickly, but I think it's also important to move with a cadence, with a structured rhythm, where you're moving at the rhythm that's right for you. Yes, Industry 4.0 is accelerating, but that doesn't mean we all have to run around like nutters either. I don't believe in that. I think it's a lot about ultimately where I think success comes from in Industry 4.0, setting your own rhythm, your own tempo. And in the military, they call that your operating cadence, basically. And so the initiative on the battlefield or in the war belongs to the army that has an operating tempo that can be sustained. And so what you can see, for example, in the Russian army in Ukraine is they came in with a high intensity and then they have collided with the defensive structures of the Ukraine, and now it's stopped and it's stuck, right? And so that's for me very much an example of someone coming with high speed, high intensity, and then just hitting a barrier and just getting smashed. And might it have been better to take us, well, more effective for that Russian army to slow down and proceed step by step? I don't know the answer to that, but maybe in that way they might have discovered their awful logistics problems and everything else, right? So I think what we have to be cautious of it is about this idea of just going fast everywhere. I don't think that's the right approach. It's about, yes, it is important to recognize the world is accelerating and speeding up, but what's your capability? And if you can't move that fast, you need to focus on upgrading your capability to move faster so that you can therefore respond more effectively. I think it's also worth noting the difference between speed and agility, right? So for example, a fly or a mosquito don't necessarily have a very high top speed, but to try and hit them, is actually often very difficult, right? Because they're very agile. And so it's not necessarily that you need to be accelerating into a top speed. It's that you can respond very quickly. So, the hand tries to hit the mosquito, and obviously, usually it can escape, right? So that's because in that moment, the mosquito can activate agility and be very quick. So I don't think we necessarily have to always be moving very, very fast. I think we can actually also sometimes be moving slow, but ready to respond very quickly. Because when you're moving very quickly, it's the control systems that you need to sustain that, not crash into things, are very difficult. Possible, powerful, but difficult to maintain.
Okay. And then, so when you're talking about being agile and you're talking about upgrading your capabilities, so questions that come to mind. Of course, we know the answers because we are leadapreneurs. But how would you advise others to upgrade their capabilities in Industry 4.0? I mean, as I said, the answer's quite obvious. Become leadapreneurs, but
Become a leadapreneur.
yeah.
I think
But some general advice you have from your years of experience with
yeah,
also becoming an entrepreneur.
Yeah, I think, well, I mean, look, what is it to be a leadapreneur, right? It's to be an autonomous digital innovator. And so it's important to recognize that being a leadapreneur is not like getting a bit of extra design thinking skills. It's not a little upgrade, it's a complete upgrade. It's like from horse to car. And you have to really, in that sense, and the way I think about it is upgrading someone's mindset, their skill set, and their spirit, right? And that all has to be upgraded at the same time. And then beyond the individual, you're also upgrading the culture and the networks around that person in the organization itself. There's no point upgrading, let's say, myself, and then my peers and my bosses are not upgraded. That doesn't work at all. So I think it's about recognizing that it's about a comprehensive upgrade and really going in for that, and that recognizing that's what it's going to require. And then secondly, doing that at a greater scale, that everyone needs to get on board onto the journey. Often what I see is the seniors are over here, the middle guys are over here, the front guys are over front line, and there's no synchronization around that. So you end up with different mindsets and skill sets that don't align, and therefore it's not very effective. So I think those are some of the simple things that I can say, but ultimately, I think one thing to internalize is this transition from the management bureaucracy to the innovation ecosystem. You're basically moving from a top-down command and control structure to a decentralized decision-making ecosystem. And so what that means in plain English is, rather than having decisions cascade from the top, imagine you're viewing the hierarchy from the side, right? Because there's a top and there's a middle and there's a bottom. If you rotate your worldview to look down like a bird's eye view, what actually you create a network-like structure where the more important decision-making centers are at the center of the network, and then it kind of fans out, right? And so this is, I think, really important because it's very interesting. Like I did the math on this, but there's only what it comes down to is basically there's only so many decisions you can make per day. That's actually the basic constraint. You have 24 hours in a day, right? Let's say you work 10 hours a day, and let's say you're doing 4 good decisions an hour, right? That means 15 minutes to listen to the problem, think about it, and create a solution, right? So that means you can do 40 solutions a day. That's it. That's it. If you work really hard, you can do maybe 80, right? But you can't do 800. You can't do 8,000, right? It's not possible. It's impossible. Certainly, it's not possible to do that and maintain the quality rate, right? So making a lot of bad decisions quickly is also a terrible idea. It's better to make no decision at all. And so that is the basic constraint. And so what's happening is in this avocat reality where there's so much complex chaos and change happening, we need more decisions because you can't just keep doing the same thing. The world has changed, right? Now there's sanctions coming in. Now there's a pandemic, right? Now the stock market's crashed. Now whatever else is coming through, right? So what that means is that the decision makers can't make enough decisions to keep up with the change. And so there's a growing backlog. And this backlog is why organizations slow down, because they're waiting for their seniors to make the decision. In the military sense, and you can see this again with the Russian army, the reason why they're slowing down is they keep trying to push their decisions up to the command centers, but the command centers are facing so much chaos, and there's also a lot of communication issues amongst the Russian army, that they just can't make the decisions quickly enough. And so that what happens is the front line just has no idea what's going on. But the insight here, the physics of innovation, of decision making, reveals that the constraint is the rate of decision making, right? So, rule of thumb, making 40 good decisions a day is already great. So if you have 10 seniors, that means your organization can make 400 decisions a day. That's it. That's what it can do. Now, if you're able to push out decision making, not to your 10 seniors, but let's say to your 100 staff, right? So your 90 other staff, let's keep the numbers simple, right? So you've got 10 seniors and 90 staff, and they can all make decisions as well. And let's say for the sake of argument, they can make as many good decisions as the seniors. So now you have 100 people doing 40 decisions a day. 100 times 40 is 4,000 decisions. So you have the original organization where the seniors can only make 40 decisions a day, right? Oh, no, sorry, 400 decisions a day, right? You have 10 people, they're doing 40 decisions. Or you have an organization which has empowered 100 staff. Now they're making 4,000 decisions a day. Now, on its own, okay, that's 10x, but that quickly, over a week, right, over a 5-day working week, you're now looking at 2,000 versus 20,000 decisions. And then as you start to expand that, what that means is each decision is an option to respond. You can kind of think of that as in a boxing match, you can do one more punch. So if you can do 20,000 punches and someone else can only do 2,000 punches, you're probably going to lose because you just don't have the responsiveness there. And I think that's the insight about the fundamental constraints that people are facing. And so the transition is to re-architecture yourself towards these more decentralized, complex network approaches. But the only way that is going to work is you're going to need leadapreneurs, or you're going to need someone like a leadapreneur, right? Who can operate autonomously, that you can trust to make those decisions in the same way you trust your seniors. Because the reason why the seniors make the decisions is you trust those 10 people to have the strategic awareness, sense of responsibility, etc., to make those decisions. And you don't trust the other 90, basically, right? And that's how the hierarchy works. These 10 can make the decisions because we don't trust the 90. Now, in a decentralized system, we're trusting the 100, but in order for the 100 to work, they all have to talk to each other. They all have to have awareness. They all have to alignment. They also have to be engaged, take responsibility, all these key phrases. And so creating a culture, the mindset for that, the skill set for that, the spirit of that, right? So it's tricky. And that's what really like Leadapreneur tries to offer is a solution for that, a comprehensive solution to that, because I think you need to go all in on that. So whether it's leadapreneurs or not, I believe in leadapreneurs, and I think what we offer is very effective. But of course, there's other approaches. But foundationally, you're going to need people who can be autonomous and can make decisions that traditionally would have only been done by more senior people, if you want to increase your agility and creativity.
All right. So, yeah, definitely all strong points over there. And I hope our viewers are able to learn a lot from what you've just shared. Just to summarize about what we've talked today is the power of data. It's not just about slapping a dashboard, but using the data to drive decisions. And then we've also talked about slowing down and not going too fast, and speed versus agility. And then lastly, we've talked about upgrading our capabilities and becoming this sort of decentralized decision-making organization, right?
Yes, lovely summary.
All right. So thank you so much for your time, Jan. And if to our viewers, if you have questions, do drop them down in the comment section below. That's all for today. And
see you next week.
See you next week. Bye-bye. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the Leadapreneurs YouTube channel to get your weekly updates.